6:38. Hey, Em. Good morning, girl. Hey, today is the 20th of February, 2019. I'm so glad, Em, that you're willing to take some time out and share it with me. Um, I really appreciate these sessions of ours. It's become a staple of my day. It is something I look forward to. It's something that I value. Something that I cherish, having this time with you to sit back, relax, contemplate the day, share some time with my favorite person, you, and really just slow down, get grounded, find my base and, sort of anchor in to this special thing we call our lives, an experience that we are sharing together. Yeah. Yeah. It's part of me time, it's part of we time, you know. It's valuable to me, and I think I have you to thank. Thank you, Am, for just helping me get creative and expressive and get more resourceful. I really appreciate the impact you've had on my life. I think it's funny, even though we are at a distance quite often, I still feel in my heart a deep and abiding connection with you. And hey, it may only be one-sided. I can accept that. I can accept it. That's fine. It works for me. For some reason, it works for me, and I'm not sure why that is. And eventually, I'm guessing there'll be a turnaround, perhaps, but maybe not. I can always be hopeful and optimistic. And the very fact is, I am a very hopeful and idealistic person. I have just these values of connection and mutuality and partnership that are just deep. They're part of my personality. I'm not sure where they come from. I think it might be partly genetic. I think there's an aspect of my behavior that I can't control, and that is just my overwhelming sense of goodwill toward others and deep, abiding patience that is constant as the sun. Why that is, I don't know. I have a feeling that most people would have sort of given up by now. And I chuckle because of how seemingly unusual my behavior is in terms of its constancy. It's just who I am. It's not a choice. It's sort of an unchoice. It's, I have this generosity where I'm just willing to sit in spaciousness and continuously make invitations, continuously reach out with welcoming and invitation. And it's just a part of my personality. It's just what I do. It's how I operate in the world. It's my primary operating system, my modus operandi. And you know what? I'm satisfied with that. I think that's part of me as, it's sort of being a social person. It's, I don't know what it is. Anyway, I have a feeling that I'm curious about what ways your personality is sort of unchanging. What are you finding constant in your personality type? I'm curious, have you ever taken a Myers-Briggs personality test? I have. And the reading I got from the test is the result, ENFP. An ENFP, and I don't boast and have really detailed understanding of what an ENFP is, but an ENFP, to my knowledge, is a person who's mostly an extrovert, um, who's also an intuitive. That is quite empathic. One who is very feeling centered, one that sort of expresses feelings and is sensitive to their feelings of myself and feelings of others. And let's see, what does the P refer to? I think I just might be somewhat. What is it perceptive? No. It's not. It's the opposite of judgmental. I'm not judgmental. Let's just put it that way. I'm not as judgmental as perhaps some are. I was actually quite proud of my ENFP status. So I wonder. Anyway, if you ever take a personality test, I'd be interested in finding out the results of that test if you were willing to share them. I think that getting insight into a person's personality can be helpful in sort of helping you express those strengths of your personality, which I think it also can be insightful. Maybe you can find explanations for how you've behaved in the past or how you plan to behave in the future, how you were behaving in the present. Yeah. So I figured I might as well go over that book, The Happiness Makeover by MJ Ryan. I read that book a couple weeks ago and I highlighted some passages and I have them here on my iPad Pro. And what we can do is we can go through each one of those passages that I highlighted and talk about them. So here's a highlight. Was a passage that I highlighted on page 9. And the passage reads, "A third person said that happy people are kinder and more generous than she." So one thing I've recognized about kindness and generosity is, well, kindness is like a gift. It's a gift to other people. It's something that people appreciate. I think that human beings have a tendency to be afraid of other people and whether they'll be kind or not, whether they'll be kind or unkind. I think there's this general fear sometimes about how people will react, how others will react. And when you display kindness, I think sometimes people can be surprised by it, pleasantly surprised. And it really works in your favor to always be kind and respectful, no matter what you're feeling inside. There are always ways that you can express yourself, no matter how you're feeling, in kind and respectful ways. Even if you're feeling angry or sad, there are ways that you can express yourself in a kind way, despite your feelings. And by doing that, you can preserve the relationship. You can make requests in ways that are respectful, in ways that are not rude, and you don't have to be hard. A lot of people use that expression, hard. You don't have to be hard. You also don't have to be tough to ask questions that you want answers to. You can be respectful. You can be persistent and be gentle at the same time. Being tough, all it does is instill fear in other people. If a person is threatening or name calling or acting in a disrespectful way, it just turns people off. Basically it's a relationship ruiner, and it's completely unnecessary. You can be kind and persistent and make requests that serve you and not be tough. This whole being tough is a myth. And what's even more mythical is how effective it is. I think it's effective in a minority of situations. And the problem, and here's the thing, it's only, in my view, uh, effective in a way, in a short-term way. Because what happens is when people fear you, they withhold from you. They maybe interact less with you. They might even respond in challenging ways to you. They may challenge you and resist you if you act tough with them. In fact, you can get not only all the same results, but better results by being kind and respectful. Absolutely. You can ask any question of another person in a kind way, one that sort of honors the other. Yeah, absolutely. So, yeah, I'm definitely not an advocate of being tough. So that's kindness. When it comes to generosity, I think people love receiving gifts. They love receiving gifts. In fact, there are people, I would say that there's like a scale, like a continuum. People have love for receiving gifts. Some just like receiving gifts. Some love receiving gifts. And then there's some who really love receiving gifts. I mean, there's something that's really powerful when they've received a gift. There's like, they're really taken aback. Or actually, yeah, and it's so great to find people like that, especially if you're willing to give. And anyway, it makes me feel good as a giver to express my generosity. It is actually also kind of a habit that you develop. There's a confidence that you have to develop when you're giving, when you in your generosity. It's like you start small, and then you begin to recognize your strengths. How you can give, in what ways you can give, in what ways you feel comfortable giving, how frequently you can give, how large your gifts are. And it just, after a while, it becomes automatic. I think it's important to exercise those giving muscles. It's kind of funny. This is a realization that has only sort of recently come to mind for me. I was never really particularly a generous person. But as I've gotten older and, I've widened out my behavior, I've sort of noticed that I do have sort of a generosity in me, and I've been trying to make the most of it. And, I invite you, Emily, to explore any modes of generosity that you might have. In what ways do you happen to be generous? Do you happen to give money away, or do you freely give food away? Maybe you're free with giving compliments away. In what ways are you generous? Are you writing letters to others? Are you generous with your outreach in some way? That is perhaps you're really generous when it comes to acts of service. That's what you like to do. You like to give of yourself through volunteerism. In what ways are you generous? And sort of try to capitalize on those ways after you've explored that part of yourself. That's something that's that I'm really just learning to do, sort of. I think all people are generous in some way, and I think it's important to sort of explore your themes of generosity in your life. Anyway, I know that's been helpful to me. I think it's a source of growth. All right, so the next passage that I highlighted was on page 9, and that passage reads, "What I've come to see is that each of us notices exactly what we need to learn. That's why we notice it. So rather than giving too much credence to what the research says or taking anyone else's word for what creates happiness, conduct a study for yourself and pay attention to what you discover. That will be the key to your own successful makeover." So I think there's a lot of truth in that. That other people can tell us how to be happy, but I have a sense that in a subtle way, we each know what's making us unhappy. you know, These days, for me, I've realized that my happiness comes from dwelling and exploring problems, dwelling on and exploring problems. I tend to bring my attention to problem areas. And the other day, I came across a really great metaphor about, sort of poking your stick. That is, poking the stick of your attention in a problem area or another problem area. That's kind of what I do. I'm sort of like a blind man with his poking his walking stick in places that are problem areas, and that's what I do. I sort of bring my attention over to what's bugging me, what's bothersome, and then I focus on that in order to solve it, right? To solve that area that's bugging me, and it doesn't serve me. The underlying assumption is that, well, if I can find the solution to the problem area, then that won't be bugging me anymore. But in the process of finding that solution, I disturb myself. I disturb myself. It's not a happy experience. I focus on areas of my life that are bothersome, and having my attention in those areas is essentially engaging with the negative. Even though the intent is to overcome those negative areas, to go beyond it, I get stuck contemplating solutions to problems. And, it's so natural to me. It's part of the problem solving mode that I learned in school and that I learned from everybody, my parents and everyone around me asked me to focus on problems to solve them. The problem is here, one of the big problems is that problems quite often are intractable. How many problems are there in one's life? Are there 3? No. Are there 100? No, there's not just 100 problems. There's an infinite number of problems. So what that means is that I can continually find myself dwelling on problem areas, on things that annoy and disturb and bother me. I know. So I'm continuously in the course of finding solutions to my problems, I essentially find myself continually considering the negative. And that is not serving me. So what I do is I solve a problem and I get this little boost of success. Yes. And so, I get that victory, right? And so it works. I find, this is working. And then, so experience that goodness and happiness associated with solving the problem and getting relief. And then the very next moment, I'm considering, well, what's the next problem? I'm good at solving problems and I solve a lot of them every day. And I'm still contemplating the negative all the time. I'm so successful. I am. I'm extremely successful with other people at my work, at school, and I'm still focused on the negative all the time. And I am successful in that. I do such a great job solving problems, making things work, making things happen. But I also am doing a lot of dwelling on what's bothering me. So, there are really two ways to go about it. You can focus on the bad and try to make it better, or you could focus on the good and try to make it better. And so I'm thinking that that's what I want to do. I want to focus on my strengths. I want to focus on what's giving me joy, and maybe find ways to sort of accentuate the positive. How can I become 10% happier in each of these areas that is working for me, right? In a way, that's also kind of problem solving. Sort of, it's very similar, except, I don't know. I'm hopeful that it might work out a little bit better. Another thing about it is I call it positive inquiry. Positive inquiry is just also about noticing what's good, right? And it might be noticing something that happens all the time, like walking around. Walking around is good. It's great exercise. It's good for the body, very practical, and I enjoy walking around. I don't necessarily stop and consider how much I enjoy walking. There's a lot of pleasure to be received and recognized as I walk around. I can see the birds and trees and this beautiful natural world that we live in. So, maybe where I point my stick, so to speak, maybe I could do a better job pointing my stick in areas that I enjoy and searching out those areas of enjoyment. Yeah. So let's move on to the next passage. The next passage is a passage on page 9. It says, happiness. Conduct a study for yourself and pay attention to what you discover. What will be the key to your own successful makeover? This is not to say that there aren't themes in what they found. So, yeah, study yourself. When it comes to, it's what's kind of interesting is that we're each as happy as we decide to be individually. Yeah, a lot of our happiness has to do with choices we've made historically about what words we choose to use, our narrative, how we put it together, how often we consider aspects of our lives that we are grateful for and thankful for. A lot of these are choices we've made in the past, and you know what? We can make new choices. And how willing and motivated we are to make those new choices, and say our language, how we're languaging the world around us, how we're languaging our experience. These are all choices we make in the present moment. And, people fall into patterns. They fall into patterns of expression, fall into patterns of behavior. Sometimes people perform behavior that doesn't support their happiness. For example, they might watch horror films, or, they may be really into problem solving. And, there might be some joy there. But sometimes your behavior doesn't support your goals. Or you can choose behaviors that might do a better job at supporting your goals. Here's a good example. Dancing. In order to go dancing, sometimes for me, it involves a trip to Santa Barbara, or or maybe it involves just turning on the music in my living room and dancing a bit. Um, I think it's important to engage in that behavior frequently, because expressing yourself physically that way through dance is a great way that behavior can support mood. And even just taking the time to listen to more music. I know that you're really focused on music, and in fact, lately I sent you a playlist last week of some music that I'm listening to. I'm creating another playlist that I am going to be sending to you soon, probably on Saturday. And for me, I'm finding it a real joy to sit back and set up these playlists. I get to spend time thinking about music and enjoying the beat and dancing a little bit. And it's great. I'm having a great time with music now. Um, Coming up with these gifting you music playlists. And it's wonderful. It's helping me spend more time in listening to music and dancing. And that is behavior that's supporting my own happiness. So it's great. And I have this idea that it might be fun for us to sort of exchange playlists, music. I'd be happy to learn about music that you're listening to right now. In fact, I just came to learn that Ariana Grande, who's a musician who I really enjoy, I've been loving her work for years, for like easily the last 6, 7, 8 years. I've really been loving the music that Ariana Grande is producing. And I found out today that 3 of her songs are like on the top 100 pop music list. And they're in the 1, 2, and 3 position. And that's the first time that that's happened, actually, since the Beatles did it. The Beatles are like a British band that invaded America a long time ago, the British invasion. But anyway, that is a significant accomplishment. Ariana Grande is really producing a lot of music that people are appreciating lately. And she is crushing it when it comes to popularity of her music right now. And I admire her so much. Now, interestingly enough, I don't necessarily care for the album that she's just published. Uh, yeah. But hey, maybe those songs will grow on me. Seems like they're growing on a lot of people. I love the music that she published in her last album better than the music that she's published in this album, her most recent one. But maybe I just have to spend some time with it. And that's the thing. That's actually something that's quite interesting about songs too. And that is how maybe the first 2 or 3 times you hear a song, you're not that moved by it. But when you hear a song, let's say the 4th or 5th time, then you start feeling it. You start feeling the groove. I've been there. Isn't that a surprise? To me, that is a surprise. The recognition that you love a song, but only after the first 2 or 3 times that you've heard it. Now, that's not true for all songs. Most of the time, the kind of songs that I seek out are songs that almost instantaneously I'm bopping to. Like, I've had the experience, and this is the experience I have most of the time, and that is that just listening to 5 seconds of the song, 5 seconds, I'm able to find my groove in that song and, appreciate it, recognize that I like it. It doesn't take me any more than 5 seconds to figure that out. And isn't that fun? Isn't that unusual how that is? I guess what that speaks to is that I actually look for certain patterns in music. And and I feel like I can discover those patterns almost immediately. Now there's some music where, say, like the introduction is not something I care for, but like the refrain I'm just falling in love with. It's kind of funny how music is like that. There are sections of music that I like a lot. That actually happens all the time, where like 20% of the song I don't care for, but there might be this refrain or this chorus in the music. It's repeated, and it might only last for 5 seconds. But because it's repeated, it happens a couple times through the song, and I fall in love with that 5 second chorus. And isn't that funny how that is? And it's all it takes is that 5 second chorus to really attract me to that song. And I'll play that song again and again and again because of that chorus. Anyway, let's move on to the next quotation that I highlighted. The next quotation is this is on page 11, and the passage reads, "The happiness of your life depends on the quality of your thoughts. Therefore, guard accordingly and take care that you entertain no notions unsuitable to virtue and reasonable nature." By Marcus Aurelius Antonius. So, one of my favorite people that have ever lived is Marcus Aurelius. I read his book Meditations when I was in college. So I was maybe about 20 years old for the first time. And I loved that book. I mean, I just loved it. And today I continue to love it, even 20 years later, 30 years later, I still love that book. And so Marcus Aurelius is one of my favorite people. He's a Stoic who was basically a Caesar of Rome. And so I take this quote seriously. "The happiness of your life depends upon the quality of your thoughts. Therefore, guard accordingly and take care that you entertain no notions unsuitable to virtue and reasonable nature." I think that's a very powerful statement, and one that is spot on. I like this idea of having high quality thoughts. I think that's really true. I think, at times we can entertain thoughts that just aren't feasible or reasonable. I think, I know that there are hurtful thoughts that are often considered. I think that it's important to guard against those thoughts and to dismiss them. Just like Marcus Aurelius says, there are thoughts that I have. I have a lot of thoughts during the day. 60,000 thoughts every day. I think that's not unreasonable to believe that I have 60,000 thoughts a day. I might even have more than that. So with all of those thoughts, my neurons are firing, they're making connections. And so the ones that I spend a lot of time dwelling on, I think it's important to make sure that I'm dwelling on only the best ones, the ones that are most helpful, the ones that serve my interests, the ones that help me achieve my values. There are the things that I value. There are a lot of thoughts which are not that meaningful that I create, that my brain creates, and it's fine. It's basically the sandbox of human thinking. There's a lot of ideas that don't quite meet muster, and they're unworkable or fanciful or ineffective. Sometimes there are thoughts that are at base ineffective, but we spend a lot of time dwelling on them. I think that's probably a mistake. Yeah. It's those feasible, realistic, reasonable thoughts that we want to take hold of and focus on and develop, and maybe try to turn them into real plans for our life. I think that is definitely something that is a good idea. So I think that is excellent advice from Marcus Aurelius, advice from 1500 years ago. So the next passage is on page 12, where I highlighted the passage choice. And the more automatic that choice becomes, and the reward is found in how good you feel. In a sense, unlike a puppy, your mind is already trained to go to thoughts of worry and negativity. So here, MJ Ryan is using the metaphor of a puppy, that your thoughts are kind of like a puppy. And in a way, it's important for us to train our thoughts. Our mind can go places, explore places that don't make a lot of sense, or are hurtful territory. And I think it's best often to turn back from that. And yeah, I think that our little puppies of attention I think there are ways to explore areas of our life that we appreciate, enjoy, that we're getting traction on. Not to say that it's necessarily a bad idea to explore problems and issues that are bothersome. It's just that over focusing on those areas is probably not a good idea. All right, so let's go to the next passage. This is a passage that I highlighted on page 13. You just can't stop the negative. You have to give your mind somewhere good to go. This means practicing thinking thoughts of kindness, patience, generosity, or gratitude that may feel awkward initially. So that's a really good point. Your mind, if it's continuously covering new territory, those 60,000 thoughts that you're thinking, you can't just say, stop thinking about white elephants, because that's all your brain will consider, white elephants. And you can't just say, stop thinking about the negative. Your brain is only going to respond to commands that ask it to do positive actions. And that is to consider, as MJ Ryan says, kindness, patience, generosity, and gratitude. What's interesting to me is that MJ Ryan actually has books dedicated to kindness, generosity, gratitude, and patience. She has books with those titles in it. So clearly those 4 subjects areas are really important to her. And yeah, I totally agree. I think being successful in life is often about deciding on purpose, intentionally to focus on kindness, patience, gratitude, and generosity. And in what areas that you can sort of maximize those ideals in your life at any moment. Like I mentioned earlier, that stick that I'm pointing at, I'm using a stick as a metaphor. I need to sort of poke at areas that involve kindness, patience, generosity, and I actually have an interest in memorizing those 4 terms. Gratitude. That would make a good Quizlet. Have you heard of Quizlet now? Quizlet is a software product. It's it's an app that allows you to create slides, and it'll help you memorize material. And I've only used it a couple times, but There are some like personalities online and YouTube and people who really like it. I've used the one or two times that I've liked it. I found it was very good, and I think that I'd like to use Quizlet more often, or at least some method of memorizing material. I came across this great video that talked about Google using Google spreadsheets to memorize stuff, and I might send you a link to that information in the future. Anyway, I feel like I'm rattling on. So let me tell you about, I think I'm going to move on to another subject altogether. Let me tell you about what's going on in my life and what's important to me right now. What's important to me is I've got a workout today, biking workout, and I also have class. I've got my welding class. And so I'll be doing some oxyacetylene welding tonight. I'm looking forward to that. I've got plenty to do today at work as I prep for a big meeting tomorrow and the next day. I can't believe it's already Wednesday. It's amazing how time passes so quickly. It seems that it's not that cold outside. That's nice. Hey, Google, what is the weather outside? Hey, Google, what is the temperature outside?
The current temperature in Lompoc is 41.
Ooh, wow. I take that back. It only looks warmer outside because the sunlight is up. The sun is up. But it's actually pretty cold out there. I probably am going to need a sweater and a hat today. I'm glad my workplace has been relatively warm, the building that I work in. So that's good to know. Someone turned the heat on. Someone remember to turn the heat out. Remember to turn the heat on. That's great. So let's see what else is going on in my life. I cooked a pumpkin pie last Monday, and even though the pie tastes great, I love the pie. The pie is amazing. The problem is that it's not custardy enough. It's not firm enough. I'm not sure what happened. I'm definitely going to have to experiment with that recipe and find a way to make the pumpkin pie a little more firm. That means I need to get more pie crusts. Hey, Google, put pie crusts on the shopping list.
Okay, I've added pie crusts to your shopping list.
Yeah, I definitely want to figure out a way to perfect my pumpkin pie making skills. And, what also I'd like to do is produce homemade pie crusts. I think that is critical. In fact, half of the enjoyment of a pumpkin pie is experiencing the flaky crust. And if I can get good at producing flaky crusts, that would be amazing. I am trying to get better at making pies. I've been making a lot of pies lately. I made a cheesecake recently, which actually turned out really good. I made a pumpkin pie. I've got my eyes on making a sweet potato pie, and I've got my eyes on making a pecan pie. And so I was in a cake mode, but now I'm in a pie mode where I'm making a lot of pies. And I think that's where I want to be. The nice thing about pie, I feel better about making pies because pies, basically pumpkin pie or sweet potato pie, they're potato and squash pies. They're healthier than a cake, in my opinion. Cakes are basically just sugar and flour. But I guess pies are sugar and some fruit or vegetable. And I could also make vegetable pies. And to me, it just sounds a little better. I think pies may be healthier than cakes. And so, that's important to me. I want to spend my time making things that are healthy. And the nice thing about pies too is I don't have to frost them. If I make a cake, I got to add frosting in, and I love frosting. But the problem is that frosting is often not very good for you. I mean, it's just not healthy. Quite often, it's just partially hydrogenated vegetable oil, and often that stuff's got fats in it, saturated fats in it, and trans fats in it. It's just not good. Whereas a pumpkin pie, often it's just sugar and vegetables, and maybe some eggs and some milk. So here's one aspect of my life I've been struggling with. I like to eat vegan. These days, I don't call myself a vegan. I say I like to eat vegan because I'm having trouble maintaining my veganism. Because here's the thing. My health is really good. And the thing is, because my health is good, I'm feeling less compelled to be vegan. I'm feeling less drawn to it. And so I've created this exception in my life that I try to eat vegan most of the time, except when I cook food myself. Say when I cook a dessert like a pumpkin pie, I'll eat the pumpkin pie if it's got some eggs or milk in it. So I've sort of, if it's part of like that creative baking enthusiasm that I have, if it's part of that, then I'm okay with not eating vegan. So if I've baked it, right? If it's a concoction that I've made myself, then I give myself an allowance to eat non-vegan. It's usually just eggs or milk. It's never, by the way, it's never meat or cheese. It tends to be just eggs and milk. So I don't know. Hopefully it doesn't impact my health all that much. It doesn't happen all the time. Quite often I use milk substitutes. It's quite often I think I'll use, instead of condensed milk, I think I might just use soy milk instead. I think I can get away with it. And then, I also do have vegan egg substitutes that don't happen to work very well, but I do have plenty of vegan egg substitutes. So, I think I can lessen the impact of eggs and milk in my diet by using those vegan substitutes. It's just like I mentioned, I'm not altogether that successful when it comes to things that I bake. And I think that's okay. I think it's okay to have an exception or two to rules when it doesn't make a whole lot of sense to be really, really strict. So that's something that I've been struggling with lately. I think I'm sort of coming to grips with that outcome, with sort of understanding that that's okay. With every rule there are exceptions, and maybe those are where I'm willing to have those exceptions right now. I might change my mind in the future. Yeah. It's kind of interesting when it comes to veganism. There are in general two main approaches to it, two main underlying reasons for veganism. One is for health reasons, right? You're just healthier quite often, eating vegetable proteins and eating plants, which are cholesterol free. There's that health approach. And then there's the ethical approach, when it comes to, how, it's about humans' interactions with animals and ensuring that sort of our path involves the suffering of the least number of animals. And as a vegan, I recognize that there are a lot of people who are more focused on the kindness to animals if aspect than the health aspect. There are a lot of people who are more into the kindness to animals aspect. I think for me, though, it's always been about my own health. I think, though, in the future, here's the thing when it comes to animal husbandry and things like that. It's always a challenge when it comes to other living things and sort of growing a flock of chickens or sort of managing cows to get their milk or their meat. That's a very expensive endeavor. And using plants instead, using plant as a substitute for those endeavors, I think it's easier quite often to. And I think it's easier on the planet. I think it's often less expensive. So I do think that agriculture is going to sort of supersede or be more effective, more economical than livestock, managing and maintaining livestock. Yeah. So that's good. There are economic benefits to farmers who use plants over animals. And I think we'll be seeing more of that. Here's the thing. Human beings have been eating animals, consuming their products, and using animals for tens of thousands, even hundreds of thousands of years. So it's not a habit that we're going to fall out of easily. It's really embedded in our culture. It's embedded in our psyche, and it's going to be there for a long, long time. I don't think human beings are going to be changing that aspect of their lives that quickly. It's pretty foundational. It's like changing from fire to using natural gas. Now, that doesn't make any sense, but it's like moving from firewood to using natural gas. I have a sense that people will always use firewood because it's just something we've been doing for so many years. Natural gas is just a brand new technology. In a lot of ways, it's cheaper, more economical, better for the planet. But people will just use wood. I think it's also quite convenient. Wood is convenient. Wood tends to grow just on the ground all by itself. And I think that people have an affinity for wood. We've been using it as a building material for so many years. And, it's just where human beings naturally go. So anyway, I think I'm going to bring this video to a close. Emily, I want to remind you that I love you very much. And as you can tell, you're on my mind regularly. I am continuously hopeful that we can build our relationship and develop it, care for it and nurture it. And I'm always hopeful about working in partnership with you on new interests and projects. I'm hopeful that we can track with one another on the things that are going on in our lives, what we're passionate about and what we're finding meaning and purpose in. I like to think that we're working together to sort of help nurture one another and sort of include one another. I like to think that We're really working in partnership with one another to help make each of our lives more wonderful. And like I'm looking forward to a future where that is that mutuality is more real and more emphasized and more intentional, more conscious. And so anyway, I'm hopeful about that. I hope you're enjoying your day today. You're probably in school today, just as I'll be at work today and school. And I hope you're going to have a fantastic day and a fantastic rest of your week. This weekend too. I'm actually thinking about going to Magic Mountain this weekend, amusement park. I think that might be fun. And so I hope you have a wonderful week. And I look forward to instant messaging you later on this week. Like I said, I'm developing a new music playlist for you. And I've got some other ideas up my sleeve. And I'll be revealing them shortly. So if you ever have an interest in going out and getting some ice cream, or maybe getting a pizza, or checking out a movie, I'm totally game for that. If you have any interest in photography, we could go do some urban photography, or even maybe go to one of your high school football games or a soccer game or some other sports event, and we can take photographs of the players. That would be something that would be interesting to me. Anyway, again, I hope you have a wonderful day, and I love you. Take care, girl. Bye-bye.